welcome to our first reading of Interdimensional Horror. I am your guide, Madam Parrish. I'll go into a little detail later about the semantics of how to receive interdimensional letters and phone calls, etc., etc. But today, it looks like we have something very special. It originates from a Japanese dimension, and I kind of read ahead of time, and it looks like it might be from someplace we're all familiar with. Demon Slayer. Now I can already hear some of you groan at the idea, but come on. You have to admit, there's a little bit of fun in the insanity of it all. Now, let's see what our dear friend Takimoto has in store for us. Takimoto Hazuki was formerly a part of the Japanese Imperial Infantry. After being discharged and settling into Tokyo, he was almost immediately bombarded with letters from various comrades urging that he move further south to join them in a small village by the coast. Takimoto was alone in the world. With no family to return to, he saw no reason to question it at all, and after a few days, he found himself approaching that very village. However, upon arrival, he was not met by the warm welcome of those comrades who sent him letters. In fact, he wasn't welcomed at all. Instead, he was greeted by the sights and sounds of women weeping aloud as priests and officials looked into their homes with disgust, concern, rags over their noses and mouths as if they were trying to stop themselves from vomiting. He admittedly should have left after that. Despite his better judgment, he ended up settling down in a small row house, and for a few weeks he buried himself in his old passion for art, though at night he swore he heard sounds of hollers and screams. But he wrote that off as his brain recounting his time in the war. After all, no one walks away from that unscathed. Eventually, he did run into another veteran who was also sent loads of letters, yet couldn't seem to find the very men who sent them, supposedly. Both of them had been puzzled, but nevertheless enjoyed what little company they had in each other. Everything changed when the young man in uniform he had never seen before entered the village. He had a hollow gaze with a presence that made even Takimoto's blood go cold. And with a large display of the word destroy on his back, Takimoto assumed it must have been some sort of militant group that operated outside of the government. Small talk was useless though. The boy seemed almost annoyed every time Takimoto tried to speak with him. And Takimoto recounts how at the time he felt both angered and embarrassed when such a small child would brush him aside, no matter how hard he tried to inquire him about his history. He knows what he is now. Or what he was. The night of the attack lives as a constant loop in his head. It's the reason he wrote this letter in the first place. Takimoto recalls how he felt weak for the first time of his life, truly isolated and alone. His lantern, which had been illuminating his room, was snuffed out, and he was swallowed into darkness before a low snarl emitted from the corner. A man stood in the corner. No, something that mocked a man. He could hear it chuckle. Cold, dead eyes locking onto him. Stripes of a criminal littered his body. At least, that's what he could make out with the dim moonlight.
You're a soldier.
The creature croaked to him.
You're alive. You fought well. I hope you try to fight.
He was staring death in the eyes. The monster, the demon he now knows, lunged at him, and by some miracle he jumped up just before those dagger-like claws could sink into his flesh. He couldn't even fathom the idea of fighting. Eventually, he was in the streets, thrown through his wall and skating across the dirt. Blood and mucus and saliva leaked from his face as he scurried back, trying to crawl away. And the demon took its time. It stepped slowly from the shadows of his home, and when he just thought he was about to die, that's when the boy returned. Those sharp razor teeth fixated into a large grin, and he could see how the beast changed its attention from him to the boy, who had a large sword raised high with this look of determination on his face. But with every swing of the sword, the demon just jumped back. Obviously, with a prey that was clearly fighting back, he turned all his attention away from Takimoto, turning it all to the boy as he laughed wickedly into the night. For Takimoto's part, he ran. He didn't care about the pain. He didn't care about how cowardly he was. He admits that he wanted to live. And he did. When he returned in the morning, he saw the boy's body a few yards away. torn limb from limb with one arm missing. He's pretty sure the monster took it, and everything else was covered in bite marks and scratches and bruises. Hell, his eyes were yanked from their sockets, and it looked like the thing blasted a hole through his torso. Takimoto left after that. Clearly, he considers the demon must have been using the village as some sort of twisted feeding ground. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that it was specifically going after soldiers. He assumes that either it was mimicking the writings of his friends, or they genuinely thought it was a good place, and then once enough of them were there, the monster began to feed. That wasn't to say a chill didn't still run down his spine. If his hypothesis is correct, does that mean there was a possibility the demon was writing those letters all along? Well, that certainly was a very interesting letter. Sure do hope Takimoto survived in the end. I mean, he had to have, right? I don't know, interdimensional letters are kind of a weird thing to deal with. Oh, didn't see this. Looks like he provided us with a handy little sketch he drew. Shall we see it? Ah, of course, Akaza. Should have clocked that with the mention of the stripes. Anyway, well, my fellow witnesses, it's been fun. As always, stay safe, stay humble, until we meet again.